All right, we are live and happy Monday, everybody. Thank you for joining into this month's Wine Writers Wrap Up. And today I thought we'd take a little different type of viewpoint and really go to how consumers view wine and the bottles that they're choosing, if anything makes a difference to them, and if they hear something, whether or not they would purchase that bottle. So these are all things that winemakers have in their arsenal to we'll use the word manipulate wine, give it the a style, a particular style, or if there's something in that wine that they're looking to soften or harden or whatever. So we're doing winemakers techniques. Are they considered cheating, or do you consider them cheating? So I have a wonderful panel here with me. So I'm just going to go left to right on my screen. So Debbie, that is you first.
Me first. I'm right to left on my screen. So I'm Debbie Giaquindo. I'm known as the Hudson Valley Wine Goddess. I'm a wine blogger. I'm a wine writer. I own a wine brand called Happy Bitch Wines. I also I'm an author. I wrote Tapping the Hudson Valley, and I own a restaurant in Stone Harbor. And not looking for any more opportunities. I'm kind of tapped out. But that's okay. But you never know. I might have a weak moment.
Yeah, you're like me. It's tough to say no. We never say no.
Yeah. Nope.
And Jill, how about you?
So I'm Jill Barth. I'm a wine writer. You can find me on my blog, La Paysanne, or you can also find me. I do a column on Forbes. So several times a month, I write there about all things wine around the world. I also freelance for a few other publications. So hopefully you'll see me and read some of my work. Again, this is really interesting to me because it's, seems like it's going to be different for everybody, kind of depending on where you come from in some ways. So this is a cool conversation. I'm glad we're having it.
Thanks. And John.
Hi, I'm John Taylor. I'm a writer, blogger, and podcaster. I also work up in the Napa Valley as the director of consumer sales for Yao Family Wines, located actually in St. Helena, north of Napa Valley. It's great to be here. And I also have to say, Jill, when I met you earlier, I didn't know that you were Jill Barth. I follow you on Twitter, and I love everything you do. So I'm just going to have a little fanboy moment right now.
Yeah,
that Jill.
All the time.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because that's I feel like I have like my friends out in the world in Twitter, because I find so many great stories out there. So I'm on Twitter every day for sure, checking stuff out.
Yeah, nice. I see you there every day.
Yep.
Yeah, you do good stuff.
Thank you. Yeah,
you're very welcome.
And for those who don't know, I am Lori Budd. My husband Michael and I own Dracaena Wines in Paso Robles. We specialize in producing Cabernet Franc. And we, in addition to our Cab Franc, we have a rosé of Syrah. And I'm going to lead right into what I'm drinking because I'm doing some research because not this bottle, but this right here.
Whoa.
Could be in the Dracaena lineup soon.
Nice.
So we are looking to get our feet wet with some white wine with the 2019 vintage, and really, really excited that looking towards some Grenache Blanc. So looking to, as people who know us, we source our fruit. So we are talking to some growers right now to find the best fit for us to have the quality wine that we expect. So research. So what else is everybody else drinking?
So I already drank, but I'm trying to find a picture because I took a picture. It was a White Cliff Vineyard rosé from their Olana vineyard that they manage, which is part of the Olana estate, which is a historic estate up in Hudson, New York, and it sits on the bank. The vineyard sits on the banks of the Hudson River in its own little microclimate. And it's my first time tasting this wine, and it was really, really nice. Had strawberry, passion fruit. It just was really nice. But I took a picture, and I didn't post it yet, so I'm trying to find it so I can put it in the chat.
Debbie and I have made agreements that when we do our Wine for Vet Street that we don't drink until we see each other and pour the first glass together. So That rule does not apply for her. We can't
Sorry.
deal with her for more than 2 Mondays in a row, you know.
I'm telling you.
Jill, do you have something in your
Yeah.
glass?
You know, I don't have anything yet. I still have errands
Here's
to
my
run
wine.
with my daughter, so I haven't gotten to wind down my day yet. I have 3 teenage kids, so my day goes on in the evening. But I had a really cool wine over the weekend for Open That Bottle Night. And
Oh,
talk about that because it's from Williamsburg Winery out in Virginia. I have
yeah.
kind of a thing for Virginia wines, and it's their Adigio Bordeaux blend that was on their Governor's Cup. It was won, I think, in 2014, maybe, and it was in the list of like their top 12. So it was really cool. It's like a big, great, yummy wine, Petit Verdot mixed with a few other things. So I'll give that wine a shout out, even though there's none left.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was
That's
really good.
awesome. John, are you clinking with me?
Oh, I'm so totally clinking with you.
All right.
I am currently clinking the a Picpoul Blanc. I found this bad boy at Grocery Outlet. It was so awesome. In one of my previous jobs as a national sales manager, we used to liquidate all of our back inventory through Grocery Outlet. So every so often I stop by there to go see who has liquidated what recently. And you can get some really amazing wines for really incredible prices because everyone's doing it on the down low, hoping that no one notices that their wine's in Grocery Outlet. So I made a run there the other day, picked up like a case. I got a couple bottles of this Picpoul Blanc. It is actually from Languedoc. So and for $5. So
Oh my God.
yeah. And I found a couple of great Chenin Blancs and a couple of other really nice things. But this Picpoul Blanc, it's really delicious. It actually has kind of an effervescence to it. And I don't know if people are very familiar with Picpoul Blanc. It's a blending grape from the Languedoc region that sort of is always in the distance. But sometimes you can find it as a 100% varietal. And it's delicious. It's both floral and kind of herbaceous at the same time. Super light, crisp, low alcohol. So, yeah, I don't have the kids tonight. So, whoop, here we go. Yeah.
See you later, bottle.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I just picked up a Picpoul Blanc today from the Languedoc, but it was $12, which I thought was a steal.
Still a steal.
Right.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I did not know about this Grocery Outlet tip. I am going to have a little chat with Mike and get him on the ball of heading over there every so often.
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, I just did a whole sort of podcast on it that we're launching it next week. But yeah, you also find a lot of bargains that are based on people who had contracts for a brand. They wanted to create a brand and then the contract falls through. So the person is just sitting on top of, 4, 5, 10 pallets of wine that is not going to go anywhere. So off it goes to Grocery Outlet. You find some, especially some Napa Cabernets that way of like, what is this label? I've never seen this in my life. And it's $10.
Wow.
So yeah, Grocery Outlets, yeah. Good to know.
All right. That's Jill, you don't have grocery outlets, do you?
No, nope, not around here.
Is that just a California thing, John? Because I've never heard of it before.
Yeah, Western United States. I know when I was liquidating there, it was California, Nevada, Colorado, a couple others. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's a good tip. All right. Now I got a new mission.
There you go. You got to get checked out.
That's better than the Bevmo 5-cent sale.
Yes. Yeah, which is a great thing on its own.
Yes. Yes. All right. So today we are talking about winemaking techniques. And the first one I wanted to bring up, and I don't really have them in any particular order. They just were kind of in the order that they popped in my head. But the first one I wanted to talk about was chaptalization. So if anybody who's listening or watching doesn't know what that is, it is actually a technique, and I didn't know this. It's named after a French chemist, Jean-Antoine Claude Chaptal. I didn't know that. And it is basically the correction or improvement of the must by addition of calcium carbonate to neutralize acid or of sugar to increase alcohol strength. Basically, it's adding sugar to your wine must. And it is actually illegal in many areas, and pretty much you can go where it's legal is where it's much colder weather, where the grapes don't really have the time on the vine to get to full ripening. So it is prohibited in Argentina, Australia, California, Italy, Spain, and South Africa. And in the Cat's wine, it is also prohibited. But New York, Debbie?
I don't think it's prohibited.
No, okay. Okay.
Nope.
And I think it is allowed in Virginia, and I know it's allowed up in the Niagara area.
Yeah, it's allowed in New York.
Yeah, and in Canada. So what do we think about adding sugar to the wine? What's our thought process of, is this cheating? Is this, just, yeah, whatever? Anyone? I started off with probably the toughest one. I shouldn't have started with the toughest one.
I don't know if it's cheating, if your intention is to facilitate the fermentation process. If you're trying to get that fermentation going, you're trying to get to increase your alcohol level, that sort of thing. It doesn't feel like cheating. But I think this also speaks to a larger kind of argument of purists versus non-purists. You can take this argument all the way over to native yeast fermentation and say that anything aside from native yeast is cheating. If you're adding yeast, well, that's not the yeast that was growing on the grape, so obviously you're not doing it right. But if you're adding sugar to get sweetness, then maybe that's cheating.
But in say the Northeast, where I am, where climate, weather shit happens, and you don't have that sugar, you need that sugar to just start the fermentation.
Yeah.
So where it's used just for that. Otherwise you got a whole bag set of, years worth of grapes that you're just going to have to find another use for.
Right. No, so, that makes sense. That to me seems like that's not cheating. You're getting the fermentation going, and if that yeast is eating all that sugar as well, then you aren't having any sugar left over. You're not sweetening your wine. You're not manipulating it. You're just getting the process started.
Right.
It's not cheating to add flour to cookies.
Very good point.
So I'm going to throw something out there. Many years ago, I was tasting wines with a woman. She was an importer. And she said, oh, well, he must it was a semi-sweet wine that this person was producing locally in the Hudson Valley. And she says, oh, well, he must chaptalize the wine because there was a sweetness to it. And I looked at her, I said, no, this was not, chaptalized. And she says, well, it must have been because it's sweet. But I'm like, it's a semi-sweet wine.
Right.
So then you look at, where's there a line?
So by legal terms, adding sugar to as a grape concentrate is not considered chaptalization. So adding the grape concentrate is not considered chaptalization. It's actually using a sugar component, which is chaptalizing. And the issue, I think, is kind of, Debbie, with not being that was supposed to be a semi-sweet wine or whatever. Right. As I call it, the chest high shelf on the supermarket, right? Right there.
Right.
That though primary wines on those are sweetened because our American palate likes sweet wines, right? So even though people are thinking they're drinking dry wines, there is a sweet.
Right.
there is sweetness to it. So you know, they don't realize they're drinking it. I don't. Part of me, and this is really evil, I guess, but part of me feels if the grapes can't grow to full ripening, maybe you shouldn't be growing grapes.
But if it's a bad season, like sometimes we have in the Northeast,
right, right,
weather-related issues, shorter growing season because of weather-related issues.
right.
Sometimes the grapes need that little bit of sugar just to start the fermentation, and then it takes over and it becomes, you know, a world of its own.
Right. Jill, you have a
I'm curious, since it is prohibited in certain places, what that motivation, why they see this as something that needs to be prohibited when there's so many things that either are allowed but they're not said, or they're kind of behind the scenes, but this is like sort of outlaw behavior in those countries. And it's kind of interesting. I don't know the answer to that, but that makes you feel as a red flag. Like when you're thinking of shopping for wine, well, that's not allowed somewhere. It makes it seem like they're doing something a little bit, you know, risky or wrong to the wine. And so I'm going to read up on that because I don't know if each of them have their own reasons for doing that or if it was this kind of a sweeping decision at one point. So that's what I feel like when I see something prohibited and I wonder, what's the deal?
Well, I know from working in a local winery in the Hudson Valley, when it was a bad growing season and the sugars were not up enough to start the fermentation, we had at points had to add sugar just to get the fermentation started.
But you had
just in a bad year.
You had a great concentrate.
Yeah.
So that's not technically legal.
Well, it
wine.
In the,
that's like the gray area. You know, that's
so
technically not.
It's not something that's practiced. Like, you know, it's not, okay, now we do this. It's only when it's a lousy growing season and it's needed.
So, Jill, going back to your concept, the Paddock says, I never can say it right, Paddy-Stat wine in Germany, they are, it's the nose in the air. No, we're not doing that. You know, because they can, the high quality of their wine, that I know was decided as this is, you know, this is not allowed. And because those, the you know, Cabinet, the Spatleys, the Osleys, they're all picked by the sugar level in the grape. So if they're going to let me add, if they're going to let me add sugar to it, kind of blows their whole quality system out of the water. But as for the individual states, or, you know, because I actually think California is the only state that doesn't allow it. I think the other states do. But I don't know why the other countries, I don't know if it's a quality thing or they just like went along with whomever.
Oh, there's a story there. Now we got to dig into it and find out.
Oh, I see a blog post or a whole other podcast going on about that. It actually is a really interesting research concept. I don't know. I think that if you're adding the grape concentrate just to get the yeast going, I don't really have an issue with it. But if you're changing what the wine is, if you're actually turning it into a sweeter wine so that people with that palate are drinking it, I think that's wrong. You know, make the wine that you're supposed to make, you know. But that was, I don't know. So I guess I started, like I said, I started with the hardest one. The next one, unless anybody has anything else to say about chaptalization. No?
I'm good.
Okay. The next one I think is a rather heated debate. And it's something that Mike loves to go into a tasting room and ask this question. And so I think it's hysterical. It's always the first question he asks when we get poured this wine. And it's either deer in the headlights of the person behind the table, behind the counter, or then a whole big long story from the person behind the counter. But a rosé wine, a Saignée method or direct press method. So there is definite opinion of which is, you know, higher quality or a lesser quality. And and I don't mean definite, there's like, you know, people are very equally, I believe Saignée is the way to go, and I believe direct press is the way to go. But people seem to be very heated and, you know, very in love with whatever method they believe in. But again, for the listeners or viewers, the Saignée method, Saignée means bleeding. So it involves making a rosé basically as a byproduct. So I have a red wine. I want to kind of intensify that color, that intensity in that red wine. So I'm going to bleed off some of that. And, you know, as I'm bleeding it off, some of the color is going to come out, and ooh, it makes a nice pretty pink wine. So that is the Saignée method. And then a direct press is when the winemaker goes out into the vineyard and they pick the fruit specifically to be a rosé wine. So they make the rosé wine, and then the rest of that fruit really goes into, you know, the heap. So that is direct press. So go ahead. What's our thoughts? Who's a Saignée fan? Who's a direct press fan?
I think this would make a good taste test panel, like, you know, the Saignée method, direct press method, and everyone gets their opinions, you know, as they taste the wines.
Right.
I mean, seriously, I mean, you know, I'm almost saying the Saignée method I kind of like a little bit more than direct press, but
why do you say that?
Because you're bleeding off, and then the rest of it will get pressed for whatever, Pinot Noir, Cab Franc, what have you. So it's more concentrate. You're going to get more flavors of the fruit, I think.
So you like the Saignée method because you like the red wine.
Hold on. My daughter was calling me. I forgot to turn my phone off. Sorry.
Okay. So you like, it's not so much that you like the Saignée method of the rosé. You like the effect that the Saignée has on the red wine.
Yes.
Okay. Jill?
That's my palate.
That's your palate.
So I do have some feelings on this, but not a preference, because so I have a background writing about wines of Provence, which is like the rosé thing. And right now it's pale as it can get in the marketplace. But yet that's kind of neglecting a lot of things about the rosé that it could be. It can be a range of colors. And in fact, this is a really cool conversation right now amongst rosé fanatics, I suppose, about trying to use more local varieties all around the world, especially in the face of climate change, which I just covered this with Liz Gabet. If you guys know her, she's a master of wine and she's in France. Not to get into her story, but it's really cool because she's studying native grapes all around the world and how they can be used to make rosé. And a lot of times they're darker, which is a little bit outside of the look at the moment. So some of the history, I was reading up on this before, because I remember when I was just getting into my Provence studies, they have a respect for Saignée over like the course of time, history, even though like now it doesn't seem like that. And there was even part of Provence that required some element of Saignée back in the older days. This isn't part of the AOP now. So it's just an interesting thing to see that perhaps it's not just a byproduct, even if it is, and that's how it's made, it still has meaning and is done for a certain value, you know, not just an afterthought. So I think it's interesting to consider both, probably. And I think it's another thing where you kind of like want to trust your winemaker, because if they think this is how it's going to turn out and it's going to be great, then why not give it a try, you know, rather than saying, I only drink one way. Maybe give the winemaker a chance to explain how they came to make this. Certain grapes are nicer, you know, Saignée than direct press. Some you wouldn't want to, you know, do one way or the other. So just it's an interesting thing that I think could be done differently depending on the circumstances.
John?
I think I'm pretty much in Jill's camp. Sorry, my cat is pretty much in Jill's camp about, I don't have a personal preference, but I do think that the grape will sometimes dictate which one is the preferred method. But I'll give this perspective. In Napa, because the grapes are so expensive, the Saignée method is typically the one that's used because it's very rare, especially that someone sets out to say, I'm going to make a rosé of Pinot Noir and not make a Pinot Noir as well. So they'll do a Saignée method to extract that first bit of juice, and then they'll use that for a rosé, and then they'll use the rest for their Pinot Noir. And then that way they kind of maximize the value of these very expensive grapes they bought. I know it's that way for a couple other different varietals as well, but it's very rare that someone is going to get the grapes, especially Pinot because it is one of the more expensive ones, and do a direct press method because all they're going to do is a rosé of Pinot Noir. That said, the crazy ass prices that we have here in Napa, kind of also dictate, that some might go that way. When you're paying $30 or $40 for a bottle of rosé, sometimes it means that that's what the intention was for those grapes all along.
Right. And that is, so when we got into producing a rosé, my dream, obviously, anybody who knows me, my dream was a rosé of Cab Franc. I mean, but we want to do a direct press, and our Cab Franc is just too expensive for us to do a direct press of Cab Franc. And our Cab Franc price the tonnage is going up and up and up. Mike keeps joking I'm doing too good of a job of Cab Franc Day. But the price is going up and up, but we want a direct press. We like a direct press. But in Provence, I do know there is still a very high belief, care, or I don't know what the correct word is, for the Saignée method. It's not a no-no in Provence, where I think it's similar to screw caps here in America, right? America's not quite ready for screw caps. I don't think some people are quite ready for, the Saignée. So our rosé is a Syrah because there is so much Syrah available in Paso that we can get the quality of the fruit that we want for a lower price, and we can do it because we don't produce a Syrah. Maybe it would be a better business model if we did. I don't know, but
sell. Always a tough sell.
We prefer the direct press. And I honestly don't know if Debbie, if you did a blind tasting, if I would be able to say, hey, this was a direct press or this was a Saignée.
If you can, about it,
the mindset.
Really takes a difference between a Saignée or a direct press?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think, in my opinion, I think you get more flavors in a direct press than in a Saignée. The aromas, probably also a bit of the aromas, but I think you get more complex flavors when you're doing a direct press rosé than you do in a Saignée. And
that's what the winemaker's looking for.
Right. And
as well.
I love Provence. I mean, that's what I strive, that color, as you were saying, that pink is what sell, I was so happy this year with our rosé, and I wasn't there to bottle. So Mike was there to bottle, and he took a picture, And before he sent me the picture, he's like, "Oh, you are gonna be happy," you know. And then he took a picture of it and he showed me the wine, and I was, because last year it was darker than what I had wanted it to be. The acidity was there, everything else was there that I wanted, the flavors, all of that was there, but I liked the lighter color. And this year we've got the lighter color and everything. So I do style our rosé after the Provence, but my mindset is making a rosé to make a rosé, not well, I'm going to make this wine a little better by doing this, and then just selling you in worse words, the plunk, the stuff I don't want, I'm going to sell off to you. But cheating, I don't know. I think it's more of an opinion thing. But
I agree.
Yep, I agree with that as well.
Definitely not cheating.
Yeah.
I mean, some winemakers even say on the label, this was done with the Saignée method, and others say this is a direct press method. And I think you might find more that would say it's direct press so that they get a little more legitimacy from the process.
But here's the question: do the consumers, Joe consumer that's out there, do they know or understand what the differences are when they're going to purchase a wine, a rosé?
I'm going to pass that to you because you're more of the expert on that.
Me?
Jill.
Oh, okay. I would say no. Most people don't understand it all.
Right.
I would say actually this is probably what this whole conversation boils down to, is what the consumer understands and what they don't. And I would say very few people have access to this information to even learn about it. You have to dig to find these things in research, basically. You know, it's not on the label. Yes, how your rosé is made might come up in the tasting room, but I doubt anything else that we talk about will even be part of a tasting room conversation. Yeah. So if a person's just at the store, I would guess even wine shops probably don't go into this kind of thing. Yes, with the Saignée versus direct press, maybe, but I really don't think average people just shopping for a wine know that rosé, how it's made at all. There are probably still people that think it's a mix of red wine and white wine.
Right.
And that's not criticizing the consumer at all. It's just you have to decide you want to read about this to learn it or get somebody that's going to teach you. So I would think people would be interested to hear both ways if they were entitled to these conversations. I think this particular topic, out of all the ones we're going to talk about, people would feel comfortable with either thing. I don't think they'd feel like one is worse than the other, unless maybe you described it as this was the leftovers. They just were the leftovers. People might not like that, but knowing that it's an actual method that is respected and chosen and applied in certain circumstances, I think would make people feel comfortable with both aspects. But I don't think people really know. I mean, if I went out and asked my buddies, I think most of them would be like, "What? What are you talking about? You know, I don't know. I don't care."
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think the average person who's raising a glass and hashtagging rosé all day knows what it is, or nor do I think they care. So I think it comes down to the winemaker's preference of how they feel it is. You know, like I said, we feel it gives us more complex wine, more aromas, more flavors. So that's the way we go. But who's to say what happens in the future, you know? So yes. All right. Next up is I can't remember exactly when the first time I heard of this, but it actually kind of blew my mind that it was something that people did, or that there was a topic of it. But Mega Purple. So again, this is one I'm not so sure the average consumer has ever heard of.
I never heard of it. I saw that on the thing. I'm like,
really?
Mega Purple?
Really?
Yeah.
So I mean, as a consumer, I did not know anything about Mega Purple. When I started getting into wine, and going to UC Davis and taking classes that way, that was where I learned about it, because this is just truly a winemaker's, back pocket, let me do this type thing. But so Mega Purple, its purpose is to make wine more deeper in color than is expected by, or that is expected by the consumer. So, um, going to Jill saying, you're going to see maybe direct press on the label. Nobody is putting, hey, we added Mega Purple to our wine. But Mega Purple is added to correct color the bottles. So this blew my mind. I found a stat that said that Mega Purple is being added to approximately 25 million bottles of wine annually. And
that's where we get the purple teeth from. Seriously.
It doesn't surprise me. I mean, to me, I'd be the absolute first to say that Mega Purple is cheating. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. If you want to talk about cheating, Mega Purple is cheating. That's straight up cheating.
We have cheater.
Yeah. I won't name names, but of the half dozen wineries that I've worked for, only one did not at some point use Mega Purple or some other coloring in one of or more of the varietals that they produced. It was incredibly common, as was the sweeteners that you talked about before, like the Chardonnay sweetener, or even a mallow taste. I forget. Golly, I'm sorry. I guess there's more alcohol in this Pitbull Blanc than I thought. But yeah, and to me, that is straight up cheating, and that is the kind of behavior to me that warrants the idea of an ingredients label on a wine bottle. If you're putting in crap like Mega Purple and all these other coloration, because there's white wine coloration as well. There are those sweeteners, there is Chardonnay flavoring, there is all that stuff. If you're going down that path, to me that says that's an ingredients label. You've got to tell the consumer what they're putting into their body. Why would this wine filled with chemicals be any different or any more exempt from anything else that you buy out there? As you can see, this gets me all riled up.
I agree with you. I mean, that it is cheating. And if your grapes are, if you're not, whatever the case is, it doesn't extract enough color or they're light that season, that's what the growing season lends itself to. And that's why you can't really judge wineries, every year is different based on the growing season. So, I agree completely with you. And you're not letting the grape speak for itself for that growing season, for whatever, it lends itself to. Yeah, and there should be any additives like that in a wine.
And it especially becomes heinous when the winemaker then comes to the people in tasting room or to the national sales or direct consumer salesperson and says, "Look at the fabulous color that this thing has because of the Petit Verdot we put into it. Isn't that some deeply garnet color from that Petit Verdot?" And it's not from the Petit Verdot. So yeah. I'm going to start drinking. I'm sorry.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Jill, do you have an opinion on Mega Purple?
Totally agree, and totally agree that labeling is the next. I think wine shipping and wine labeling are like next big game changers when it comes to wine. If the labels had to say what was in there, I think that would be a big difference for wine consumers. And it's funny, I even wrote down in my notes before, I was like, I don't see any need for this. And then I started thinking, John, when you were talking about this being used, was it being used like in stylized wines that are like expected to always be the same all the time? Because it seems like, okay, if one year it's a little lighter, one year it's a little darker, that's part of the fun of drinking wine for most of us. But then I think if it's trying to meet a consumer expectation, like a Coke is always a Coke kind of thing. Is that what you think people are using that for more than?
Yeah, and I think that the expectation was definitely on Cabernets and Syrahs. I think, and there was a lot of yeah, I would go with the Cabernet and Syrah were the two most common ones to have the mega purple, because there was this expectation that a Cabernet has to be a certain color.
And the cab has to be dark.
Yeah, and a light Syrah is a little weird too. And then
Don't
interestingly
want
enough,
to be confused with the Grenache. Don't want to be confused with the Grenache.
exactly. There you go. And but when there was also, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but there was also a lot of blending Syrah with Pinot to achieve the same thing, to have a deeper color and maybe a little more oomph behind it. That's a whole kind of different subject, but I saw it more on Cabernets and Syrahs exactly for that consumer expectation that this is what a consumer expects the wine to look like year after year, like you say. So yeah, so it is like a Budweiser or a Coors or something where you are not going to pick up a bottle that tastes differently vintage to vintage. And again, I think that's also why you'll see it in some of the less expensive, the $10 and below wines, because they are trying to achieve that consistency that the consumer knows they're going to take that bottle off the shelf and it's going to taste exactly the same every time. They're not looking for a difference in vintage. They're not looking. They want the same experience no matter what.
Yeah.
Right. They're not even looking at what the vintage is on the label.
Right.
They want wine A to taste like wine A every year, every day, every week, every month, every year.
Go-to wine. It's my go-to wine. Yeah.
Now, I was laughing that you said the $10 because I do agree. I think that it is more prevalent in there, but there is a very, very expensive bottle. Well, what I consider an expensive bottle, not not Mouton Rothschild, expensive, but a very rather expensive bottle that everybody oohs and ahs over, in my opinion, when they don't really know wine by the name. And every year it's the same wine over and over and over again. And not that I will ever say that they're using it because I have no clue, but Caymus is a wine that people buy who, they're buying it for the name and they're buying it for, their whatever their regular Caymus, that wine tastes the same every year, right?
Yes.
And there is no way you can make a wine exactly the same unless something else is happening. And I'm not saying they're doing anything, but I know people who, they're like, oh, it's my birthday. My husband bought me a case of Caymus, oh, it's under the tree. And it's the same wine every time. And you've got to be doing something to get that. You know?
And again, I don't know. I'm not saying anything against Caymus or
Neither am I.
But there's no way that Conundrum tastes exactly the same year after year. It's a white blend. No. No.
Right.
Okay.
I am not going out there. I am not saying that they are doing anything. I am not saying that. But the people I know who are buying that wine are buying it because it tastes the same. This is what they expect in this wine. And year after year, no matter if it's a drought or it's torrential downpour or a blizzard or whatever, that wine tastes the same. And that's that market, but so I'm going to ask you if this changes your mind about Mega Purple a little bit, because I think we're all on the same thing that no, that's cheating.
Yeah,
but it is actually not artificial. Mega Purple is actually a Tinturier grape. It is produced from those. There's 4 or 5 grapes that actually have a red pulp, actually red inside and outside. So it is actually made from a grape. Of course, they do add loads of sugar on top of it, so that's a whole other story. But but it is actually Mega Purple is actually made from whatever those grapes are, the Tenturia grapes that have the red pulp inside. So you're adding pretty much a grape concentrate to it to make it get there. Does that change anybody's opinion?
I think that kind of influences the flavor of the wine.
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, you know, you're not getting, I don't think you're getting the best of what the expression can be, the true expression, because you're manipulating it.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that it's not.
But knowing that it's not necessarily an artificial, like Mega Purple, I think, I mean, I don't know, was your opinion that it was an artificial flavor, like an artificial color?
This was the first
heard
of Mega Purple, so I'm a Mega Purple virgin. So now that I'm educated in Mega Purple, I mean, when you're adding something, it's an additive to the wine. So when you put an additive to anything, it changes what it's supposed to be.
Right. But Jill, your label deck, it's still a grape.
Yeah, and I actually read that some makers use it to cover up like the green pepper pyrazine flavor too. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's something I've just read. So that kind of ties in with what you're saying here, Debbie, about changing the flavor. And if that's the intention, then that's really wacky, right? To seem like covering that up. Yeah.
So
maybe they should leaf pull so that the sun gets to the grapes, so they wouldn't get that.
Right.
I mean, you know, I don't know. I know that's hard when you're, you know, vineyard manager or whatever, but you know, a hard time with the additives.
Right. Mega Purple, the purpose of Mega Purple, I guess its original purpose, it actually smooths out flavors and it does increase the fruit intensity because you're adding grape to it.
Right.
It is actually used in very low doses because it is so concentrated. It is so potent. But I mean, in my head, when you were saying, Jill, that you know, it should have a label deck, you know, an ingredient. What, I mean, do they label it as Mega Purple, or can they get away with calling it a grape because it's a grape?
Yeah, I have a feeling that the consumer would never get to hear Mega Purple. They would have something else. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Not unless you're listening to this podcast.
Yeah.
But it's just like buying a box of Lucky Charms these days, because it says on the box, you know, made with natural and artificial colors and flavors. I mean, if, let's say you called Mega Purple, you know,
natural
awesome wine sauce, then it would still be a natural flavoring. And to me, that still warrants being put on a label, made with natural flavorings.
Right. Because now you're admitting that something that did not come directly from that field,
right,
has been added to it.
Right. Something that is not a grape is in here, you know, or yeast.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, that's true. Again, not to get too far off into the weeds, but when you buy a loaf of bread, you know, bread is a very similar kind of thing to me in terms of process and function. And there's still ingredients on bread: wheat, yeast, salt, water. But if they added corn syrup, if they added something else to get that, you know, bread, the flavor it has, that has to be included on that ingredients label. Yep. And it would be the same with a bottle of wine: grapes, yeast, and then whatever else you put in there. Right. Yeah.
All right, take a look at a Wonder Bread label deck.
Made with everything that will kill you.
Yes, yes. All right. So from the red wines, let's go to, well, actually it's can be used in both, but oak chips and oak essence. So and actually oak staves. So wine barrels are expensive. I mean, they are big bucks. And you know, you can go ahead and you can buy them and they do wonders for the wine, and you can, you know, but it takes a lot of money to buy a barrel. And we're talking, big bucks, French, Hungarian, American, they're all really expensive. And when you expand out to, I need X amount of new barrels every year, it just multiplies. You're talking $10,000s by the time you're making a wine or two. So they have come up with this concept of oak chips, oak essence, and oak staves. So very quickly, oak staves are really barrels that have been taken apart. So as those staves of a barrel, you take them and they're on a string basically, and you put them you attach them to the bung, and they hang in the barrel, and they hang in whatever you're doing. So you could buy a neutral barrel, let's say, so you're not getting that oak intense, and then you're putting the stave in. Oak chips. The best way I can explain oak chips is like the big bark, those big pieces of bark that you can use as I just blanked, mulch, as mulch. You throw them in there. But they're usually in a bag, and they're floating around in a bag. And then there's oak essence. Oak essence. I think even people who are willing to use oak chips and oak staves frown upon oak essence. It's like the low man on the totem pole. Oak essence is literally liquid chemical oak. Okay. So it saves you a lot of money. You do get a lot of the same things. You can get that Chardonnay vanilla that people are looking for. It can tame the tannins, all that, but it's not an oak barrel. So go. What do we think of that? We're not as fired up about that one, are we?
Who wants to go first? All right, let me say this about that. I have no problem with oak chips, oak staves, oak anything in making the wine, as long as you don't then subsequently say that this was aged in oak. Because that's when it becomes cheating. Okay. If you say this wine underwent an oak process,
ooh, okay, that's marketing for you.
Yeah, I know, I'm the worst. Then that's okay, because it underwent an oak process, but it was not aged in oak, fermented in oak, however you want to put it. And so I think you have to sort of walk this line, and either you don't mention it at all, or if you are mentioning it, you mention it honestly. Because that's when it becomes cheating. It becomes cheating if you say, oh yeah, we aged this in 60% new French oak. And no, you didn't. So yeah, you're walking the line of moral ambiguity with that one.
I agree with you, because there's, oak barrels are expensive, and some wineries, when they're just starting out, they don't have the funds to purchase, whatever X amount of barrels, so they can purchase the swabs or the chips, and they can put them in the barrels. But when you say aged in oak on the label, everybody assumes you're talking about barrels.
Yes. Yeah.
So in that respect, do I say it's cheating? Yes, but it's also a play on words. If you if you really look at it.
Well, you are using the word in. You are using the word in. Right. So you're saying aged in, or
I'm just taking it from wineries that I know who use the chips, and they say aged in oak.
Right.
You'd have to say the oak was in this wine.
So I think that unless you see maybe oak barrels, you know what I'm saying? It is a play on words, because and the only reason why I know of these wineries is because I took a tour. They told me they were proud, with oak chips. This is very early on in this one particular wineries, and I kind of just walked out of there, and I'm like, but you're label says aged in oak, and I'm thinking it's oak bottle or barrels.
Right.
So there's a little bit of a misconception there on the label, but that's totally legal. So is it cheating? I think so. In that respect.
The way you're saying it, I agree. You're misleading your consumer.
Yeah, but I have no problem with them using it, because if that's how they have to achieve what they want to achieve without the expense, especially if they're starting out, that's a way to kind of meet in the middle, but be honest on your label.
Right. Or just don't mention it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Jill?
Yeah, I'm curious about this one because I haven't gotten to experiment with it to like you said, you got to see a tour and they showed you. It seems like most of the places that I visited haven't touted this as something that they're doing. Not saying that they're not doing it, but it makes me think when you said that people maybe just starting out or to avoid the expense of the barrels. It's funny, when I Googled this to just look up, you know, I wanted to see what's going on with it. A lot of it seemed like it was aimed at, I'll say, like home winemakers or smaller operations, which is kind of an interesting idea to think that they're playing with maybe the amount to get used to the idea of oak. Like, and this is a question I have because you described putting it in the bag. Do some play around with a lot more or a lot less, or, you know, getting used to the idea of what it does to wine? It seemed almost like an introductory aspect, but it's, you know, maybe I'm totally wrong because I don't know a ton about the oak.
Well, it comes in exactly the same way that a barrel does. You can buy the oak chips or oak staves, you know, medium toast, dark toast, light toast. You can buy it Hungarian, French, American, and where you buy it from has recommendations of, you know, if you're looking for new French oak of this, then we recommend using this amount of staves or this amount of chips, or, you know, things like that. So there's a recipe, for lack of a better word. You know, I think the companies who are producing it have come up with the concepts of what is a good thing. And, you know, you could always go in and, you know, a winemaker is tasting their wine on a regular basis. So they could be tasting it and say, oh, I got to take these staves out now, or, oh, I need to add more staves.
Yeah,
So,
and that's the difference, I think, from aging it in an oak barrel that's going to stay the same, rather than, you know, spice, pepper and salt and spicing in the midst of doing it. That, I think, maybe gives the winemaker more control than a barrel. And I don't know if that bothers people or not, if they consider that cheating. I don't know. Just like you said, throw a little more in, take a little out. You know, I don't know.
Right. And then I do think it's funny that even among them, there's a down look on the essence. Apparently, the essence is really don't even the people who use the chips.
That totally is cheating.
Use the essence.
Is it a liquid?
It is a liquid. It is an actual liquid. I'm trying to see if I can find where it said. So there's powder and shavings. Those are usually added pre-fermentation. Staves and sticks are added post-fermentation. And then they said, even within the oak additive world, there is a hierarchy. Oak extract is considered the instant coffee of the winemaking genre, complete with stale and unpleasant character. It's made by soaking oak chunks and chips in high-proof alcohol. All you do is add a measured amount of liquid to your finished wine and stir. So you're producing your wine, I guess, and then when you're ready to bottle, ding 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 with your tincture, and you're done to go.
I say that's cheating.
Yeah, that sounds a little you know, sketchy to me.
Yeah.
No.
All right. I don't want to keep you too much longer. We're at just about under an hour, but I do want to bring up Debbie suggested microoxygenation, so I want to end with that one. Microoxygenation, which is also referred to as MO or MOX, is a way to add oxygen in small measured quantities to wine. It adds the level of control to the winemaking process. So when it comes to the wine, we know that oxygen requires that delicate balance. So too much oxygen can lead to a nutty, tire characteristic of oxidation, while little makes it all tight and skunky and whatever. So microoxygenation effects could be to soften the tannins so that you can drink the wine earlier for an earlier consumption. It does help in color stability, so you can keep that darker color for a little bit longer. And it does add to aroma integration and helps in the reductive notes. So before we actually get into this, Jill, you had brought up Open That Bottle Night, and I was at Jim Van Bergen's house Saturday for an amazing Open That Bottle Night, JBB Uncorked. And he opened it was amazing. It was amazing what he opened. But he opened a 71 Nebbiolo. And when he opened it, I like almost cried with how good this wine was. It was so amazing of a wine. And then, he opened another bottle and another bottle and another bottle. And we were sitting there and I'm like, well, I'm going back to that Nebbiolo. And it was like 40 minutes later and it was almost undrinkable 40 minutes later.
Really?
That's how much oxygen can impact a wine. He opened it. He didn't decant it, which is a whole other topic of what you can and can't decant and when you should and you shouldn't. But he didn't decant it. He just poured it in a glass. I tasted this wine and it was incredible. It was incredible. And then 40 minutes later, the window it went right down. And the acid that was holding it all together when we first tasted it was off on its own. It was a discombobulated mess almost at 40 minutes later. So microoxygenation is going to play a role in it. So what do we think of that?
I'll tell you, I didn't know anything about microoxygenation until my husband worked at a local winery bottling or during harvest, and they do that. And they do that to get their product out earlier than it would be. So with that being said, I also recently had a bottle of this particular winery's wine, and it was a Syrah, which it was a 16, I believe, and I thought it would be a lot more tannic, and it wasn't. Okay. Which, ding, 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 microoxygenation. Why can't I speak? Oxygenation. And I'm not even drinking right now. But people buy wine. Yes, they want to take it home and they want to drink it, but they also want to take it home and cellar it. So it's, I'm a firm believer in letting the grapes do their thing. I don't want, any help. It's almost like, steroids, it's like injecting them with steroids so they reach their peak so that people will buy it, they'll take it home and they'll drink it. But I really was expecting a lot more tannins in this wine, and it just kind of...
Were you disappointed that there was less tannin?
I was disappointed, yeah.
Oh, okay.
It was just it was smooth. It was just non-eventful.
Oh, okay.
I guess you would say it was, but I understand from the standpoint of a winery that produces 2,000-3,000 cases a year and having to get their product out instead of holding it back till it might be ready to be released and then aged. But I don't know. I just think you're messing with things that shouldn't be messed with.
Okay. Jill, John?
Well, then on the flip side, I mean, it does have a shorter life in the bottle if it's already had. So, you know, I guess there's a loss for the consumer in that way. You know, if they expect to age their Shiraz a little bit, just like you said, if it's packed with oxygen, it doesn't have that life.
Well, in the concept of microoxygenation, it's often used actually in conjunction with the oak chips. So what it does is it softens the tannins. It does that, and what it ends up doing is giving an effect of being barrel aged. It can help make it seem like it was barrel aged when it wasn't barrel aged.
That makes sense.
So so in some aspects, people are doing it for that process. But then, as I said, it does actually help in color stability. So if they're worried about the wine, you know, that reductive, that oxidative, you know, the color change, that brickiness that you're going to potentially see over time,
Right.
it does hold the color a little bit longer for a wine that might potentially change faster. But I think generally it's used to give the impression of a that an oak exposure has. So, does that change your opinion?
You know, it doesn't. I guess I have to wrap my head around it from the point of view of the person buying it. And if they would think they're getting screwed, basically, then that doesn't work. But if they're like, yeah, I like it, turned out fine, then maybe these practices are okay. And I think what you said, Debbie, about this being a winery getting started or really small production, I don't know. I have like a little compassion knowing people are trying to make a living making wine, and they're going straight out to the people in their tasting room that come back weekend after weekend. It seems a little different than that thing that's sitting on the shelf looking like something that it's not, where people know it's a small operation, you know, and they're making things meet, or making ends meet, making things work. I don't know, that feels a little bit more wholesome to me in some way. But that's me as a consumer.
But I kind of
feel, yeah.
Let the grape do its thing naturally.
Yeah.
I'm a naturalist, I guess, you know, let it take its course of action.
Okay.
Totally agree with that.
John?
Yeah, I think that kind of up to this point, I was sort of neutral on the whole idea of mocks. And then something that Debbie said really kind of struck me in terms of, you know, is it putting a wine on steroids? And is that kind of a correct metaphor in terms of, is it, you know, a kind of manipulation that is unnatural and, you know, if not chemical? And I don't think it's chemical. I think it is a process. So yeah, I like Jill. I'm also trying to wrap my head around it a little more. It seems to me like the kind of process a winemaker would use to achieve consistency. If you had, I think it's kind of be on the other end of the spectrum. If you are a Ravenswood, and I am not saying that they use mocks, but if you're a Ravenswood and you need to put out 1 million cases a year of a wine that has to taste the same all the time, and your samples come back to you and it's too tannic, it's too big, it's too bold, all right, mocks it and see if that gets it down to the level that, you know, our consumers are used to, and then release it that way. Is that cheating? Yeah, I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. Probably it sounds like cheating when it comes out of my mouth. It sounds like cheating, but it also sounds like any other sort of tool in a winemaker's tool belt to get the desired effect they need without. Yeah, I'm thinking this through even as I talk about it. I can't imagine. I've never seen it in the wineries that I've worked for, and I can't imagine a winemaker who's making a $50, $75, $100 bottle of wine using this process. I think that in that case, you know, you're letting the grape talk and do its own thing and have its own character, and the people who are spending that kind of money for that wine are just expecting it to age gracefully in the bottle and do its own thing. So it for me, that process is more of that it's that Budweiser theory of you are trying to make the same tasting wine year in and year out. Does that make sense, or was I just rambling?
No, no, it makes sense. It makes sense. You know, I can see it from both sides of it. Take a small winery that you know, can't afford the new barrels, can't afford barrels, you know, doesn't have the space to have barrel after barrel after barrel, yet I need to get this wine out of these barrels.
So this wine was a $40 bottle of wine that I drank.
What?
It was a $40 bottle of wine.
Oh,
and it was mocked.
That was
the $40 bottle of wine was moxed.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
But what, like I was saying, like the size, you know, maybe I need to get the wine out of the barrels so that I can use these barrels. I can clean them. I can get them sterilized because I'm going to need them again. You know, maybe I don't put microoxygenation in that in that category as being a cheat. I think in my opinion, oxygen is natural. And you're I don't see it as putting it on steroids. I see it as just kind of giving a nice gentle nudge into what a little softer, a little you know, a little softer thing where, you know, going back to your nature, maybe it was a very harsh season or whatever. I don't know. I've never tasted a wine that I pre-mox and post-mox. Like I don't know what that actually tastes like. I only know it's, you know, scientifically what it's doing to the wine. I know, but I have not physically tasted a moxed wine, you know, pre and post. So I don't know. I don't know. I think of all the ones we've talked about, I think the Mega Purple was by far the most, you know, yeah, you're trying to cheat the, you know, you're trying to make something out of that. I think is the steroids right there, you know. You know, I think you're trying to cheat the consumer with that. I don't know. Microoxygenation to me doesn't seem like it's something so awful. You know, I think you're just trying to, you know,
get a product
but you are manipulating it. You're manipulating it. Absolutely. You are. So.
And to get a product out to the consumer quicker than normal.
Correct. But is that bad? I mean, is
that cheating?
Right. So I wanted.
I mean, it's a natural process. It is a natural process. But why not let it take its course? And I get the fact some small wineries need to get that product out. So I get it.
Right.
You know. Right. Do I agree with it? I'm not sure about that.
I don't know. All right. Does anybody have any other comments about any of the little cheats or non-cheats that we talked about before we get to, you know, my favorite part, the riddle?
No, it's the riddle.
Okay, riddle time. Okay. There was a plane crash in which every single person was killed, yet there were 12 survivors. How? That might be the shortest riddle I've ever done. Okay. So
read it one more time.
There was a plane crash in which every single person was killed, yet there were 12 survivors. How?
Were there dogs on the plane?
I love that answer, Panil.
That is a good answer.
That's an awesome answer.
They were on the ground watching.
No. Yeah. One more time?
Yeah, one more time.
Okay. There was a plane crash in which every single person was killed, yet there were 12 survivors. How?
Oh, they were married. They weren't single.
Ding, 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 ding.
Ah.
Oh, okay.
They were married. Yay, Julia!
Nice one. Good one.
They were married. They were
I
married.
can't believe I got it right. When you said there was going to be a riddle last time, I was like, shoot, I'm never going to be the winner.
Yay! Very good. Very good.
But very fun.
All right, so we are at the time where we give the 1 minute to plug whatever it is you want to plug about yourself or what you're doing. So we went left to right, so I'm going to go right, my right to left. So John, that makes you first this time.
Okay, I will plug my upcoming podcast. I'm just launching the Pairs with Life podcast with my co-host Christine Trice, who is known from her wine label OMG, I So Need a Glass of Wine or I'm Going to Sell My Kids, as well as a couple of other things. We've teamed up. We're doing this podcast, and we finally launch on Thursday. We're going to drop probably 3 podcasts on Thursday, and then consistently go every Monday and Thursday after that. I am, I'll just toot my own horn here. 2 weeks ago, I signed with a literary agent out of New York who's going to represent my book, strangely titled Pairs with Life. And so I'm keeping my fingers crossed that the next step is going to come with a publisher. And yeah, between that and 2 jobs, 3 kids, I guess that's about it.
And just on social media, Pairs with
social media, pairswithlife.net. Yes, you can subscribe to the podcast at pairswithlife.net. That's the website. Social media, it's all Pairs with Life on Instagram. Yes, on Instagram and on Facebook. And you can follow me on Twitter at JATauthor.
And I will say I did try to subscribe already, but I think you have to drop your first podcast before I can subscribe because I couldn't find it.
Okay.
Find it. So if you know, I will look again. But when I first heard that you were dropping soon, I went and I looked to subscribe, and it didn't come up. So you might have to drop the first one. But,
okay.
All right, but I'll look again. So
thanks.
Jill.
So super cool. I love podcasts. Can't wait for that. You can find me on social media with my name, so at Jill Barth. That's where I try to keep everything updated if there's a new story or something coming out. So pretty much that's a good home for putting it all in one place. If you, like John said, if you find me on Twitter, you'll probably get a link to what I've been working on and what I've been reading.
Awesome. And Debbie?
I'm Debbie Giaquindo. You can find me at HudsonValleyWineGoddess.com. My latest post actually was a podcast. I interviewed Andre Scheer from Cape Classics, who was the Wine Enthusiast Importer of the Year. And what I've coming up is a wine dinner at my restaurant with Lori at Tristina Wines. And I'm really excited about that. She's going to come down, and the chef has come up with a really great menu, and Laura's going to be there with her wines. If you want some information on it, you can email me at HudsonValleyWineGoddess or hvwinegoddess@gmail.com or info@kitchen330.com.
And I'm Lori Budd. So thank you all for joining in. I drop a new podcast every Monday and a new blog post every Wednesday. My podcast that went live today, I was so ecstatic about. It was so informative and so roller coaster that I had to break it up into 2 podcasts. It is an interview with Stu Smith from Smith Madrone Winery. I love this man. He is so passionate about everything he does. But so that will be this week's podcast and next week's podcast. And this week's or my latest blog post was actually about Tokai wine. So Monday podcast, Wednesday blog post, and that is everything. So thank you everybody for joining. It went a little long and I apologize, but I hope you had a good time. And congratulations, Jill, on winning the riddle of the evening. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. Next month, I think it is the same date because, right, Debbie?
Yeah, March and April are the same, or February and March.
Are the same date. So it will be the same date, and I will send out invites to you guys. And I haven't quite decided on the topic yet. I have like 6 or 7 in my head, but I haven't decided on the topic. So maybe it'll be a surprise. But same time, same bat channel next month. So thanks for joining, everybody.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us, Lori.
Bye.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye.